Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cut and Splice. This is Matt speaking.
This is Jason.
This is Gil.
So, this time around, we're going to be talking about Ken Loach's 2006 film, The Wind That Shakes the Barley, that delves deeply into the 1920 conflict between the Irish and the British forces. The film stars Cillian Murphy and Liam Cunningham, who is probably best known for his role as Sir Davos in Game of Thrones at this point. I threw this movie out there as something to discuss for a few reasons. One, well, first and foremost, I really enjoy the movie, but it's also a movie that deals very deliberately with an intersection of political and ideological beliefs between two brothers and how that comes to I don't think this is a spoiler, a tragic end, and does it in a very elegant way. Yeah, this is just something that has stuck with me for more than a decade, and not many movies do that. I don't know. I'll let you guys come in and say what you think, and tell me if I'm wrong. Uh,
I mostly had to check that it came out over a decade ago. So, um,
I was fairly certain going into this movie that it was like a 90s film or something. Then as soon as I, started watching it, I was like, wow, this is way more modern than I thought it was.
yeah,
and I recently listened to a podcast that Roger Deakins with Ken Loach and Barry something, the cinematographer.
Barry Ackroyd.
Yeah, so it's a good. Right after watching the movie, I listened to the podcast. So it was just interesting because they talked about that movie specifically at some point. Yeah, it was good to revisit it. It was one of those that I can tell you. I can start off by telling you my first impression of it when I first watched it was underwhelming. It was a bit.
When did you first watch it?
I think close to when it came out because everybody made a fuss about it. There was a really good movie, and I think I watched it around 2007, 2008. I can only guess. This was like back in film school, and I don't know. It was one of those that just a bit too slow for me. A bit too. Let's see if I don't mess this one up. It's a bit too. What's the word? It's a realist cinema. It's very simple, very minimalist too, with the shots and with the settings and the dialogue is very loose because it's a Ken Loach film, so everything is very. It's just his style, which I think generally maybe I just don't connect with as well as other filmmakers, and I think that's where I would come into the conversation. It's actually something that I thought could be a good part of the discussion built on top of this movie is that I've come across movies that are very realist, minimalist, just presenting the action almost as theater, and it works. And then other times it really doesn't work. And I don't know, with this movie, especially the first time, when I looked at my rating, I was like, oh, I was actually pretty forgiving with it. But I guess considering how people highly regard it, I still feel like I'm underrating it a bit, and I don't know what it is. It's just I didn't connect with it the first time, and I connected it with slightly more the second time, but still, I definitely felt like it's just not my kind of movie. Like it's not, it just doesn't connect all the dots for me in a way that would be more impactful. But I think that I've appreciated more this time. So that's my overall reaction.
I had never seen the movie before. I'd obviously heard about it. I watched it 2 nights ago at home. I thought it was like total shit. But no, I'm just joking. It's actually really good. Yeah, I think within the first by the time the opening kind of incident happens where the British soldiers come and like start messing with the civilians right before Cillian Murphy's about to go off to leave town and get out of his little small town life and whatever. Right after that incident, I was like already like, geez, it's kind of like this is a pretty intense movie. And yeah, it's pretty good. It's like right in the middle of Cillian Murphy's big like explosion, you know, from like 2002 to 2008 or whatever it was, 2009, whenever he made like seven movies or something that were all like really good. But I don't know. I found it very interesting because I thought, you know, my big takeaway was just like this is really a movie that really shows the horrors that these people were going through and really justifies the action that these like freedom fighters are taking. And it's just interesting watching it the entire time, knowing full well the history that, you know, the IRA, regardless of how it all started, you know, within, I don't even know, maybe what, 10, 20, 30 years from the point of this movie would eventually transition to practically, you know, full on terrorists at some point. And it's just I don't know, it's very interesting. And yeah, it was a
Yeah,
good movie.
the history is interesting, and I was gonna say, actually, never mind. Go ahead, Matt. I'll think about it.
Well, well, yeah, I think that it's interesting, and it is also interesting to just kind of note that for me, this is kind of like a fairly recent I Am Cuba for me, in that I love the movie, but I mean, if I were to sit down with Ken Loach and just talk politics for an hour, I doubt we would agree on anything.
Yeah, you know what? That's kind of what I was gonna say. Exactly, the politics. Well, I was gonna touch on that because they did in the podcast they mentioned how he's very much a leftist and all that, and that shows through in the movie too. But generally, I just thought that, you know, what they lost me a bit is when they did get into the politics. It got interesting because there's a whole conflict between the different factions, but I don't know, politics. It kind of took me back to the prequels, the Star Wars prequels. So, you know, politics are tough to pull off. Like, you know, the Spielberg did it well with Lincoln, and there's a few other movies where it works well. But politics can sometimes get, if nothing else, it's polarizing depending on your point of view, of course. But it just
Are you a
on the screen.
separatist?
Yeah, but it's it can get a bit boring. Yeah, it gets a bit heavy. But it got but yeah, if you're a student of history and you're curious, the best thing about the movie for me was I was curious to know once I realized what's going on, and I didn't even remember it from the first time watching it. But once I realized it was like I knew it was something about the IRA, but I didn't know about the thing where the faction split, and so the whole thing got very interesting historically. But I feel like as far as recommending this movie to other people, I'm not sure that I could recommend it to someone who's not interested in the history or not into realist films, because it might be a bit of a bore for some people, and maybe a bit also too strong with the violence and stuff, as far as just recommendations are concerned.
Jason, did you want to chime in?
No, I mean, I see what he's saying. It is in a visceral sense, it is a violent film for sure, and the stuff that happens has a lot of like, what's the word? A lot of weight to it. Doesn't have anything to do with my recommendation of the movie or anything, especially the very end and everything. I don't know. On IMDb, I'm seeing it says not rated. I don't know what this thing was rated or if it was never rated.
Well,
I mean, I was expecting a hell of a lot more blood.
yeah. Actually, the funny thing is, I saw the movie for the first time in theaters, and then I took a few years off before I rewatched it. And honestly, I remembered it as like a PG movie.
Yeah.
I just didn't really remember the violence. I didn't remember the profanity. I didn't remember all that stuff. I just remembered the story and the cinematography and the acting and all that stuff. The violence just kind of missed me the first time around, and then upon rewatching, yeah, I mean, there are a few scenes that are kind of brutal, but you also have a few scenes where people are getting shot, and I don't even think they use squibs.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna say there's scenes where people are not only getting shot, they're getting shot like 6 times. Like
Yeah.
some of them. And there's no squibs at all.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't find it to be particularly brutal in that sense. I mean, at least not in a gratuitous sense.
No, certainly not.
What I will say is that upon rewatch, it actually had more emotional impact on me than I had in the theater. Like,
Yeah. So I mean, what was your rating? I think you mentioned that it was pretty high.
I'm just gonna say 9 out of 10.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it gets better every time I see it.
Cool. What about you, Jason?
Oh, I'd say like a really strong 7, like maybe 7.5, something like that. I really, just to kind of reiterate, I did really like it a lot. I think I'd recommend it to someone as a very good movie if they were telling me that they were interested in this kind of a movie, but particularly if I knew they were like into more of a historical drama type of thing that's going to delve into the very like emotional aspects of the situation in that way. Because if you're looking for a similar movie, there's definitely a lot more stuff that involve a ragtag band of people fighting for what's morally right against a superior military force, like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and like Star Wars, and
That's a much easier watch. Yeah.
yeah. Well, and Braveheart and stuff like that, where
Star
not just
Wars.
not just an easier watch, but also like again, I can't stress this enough. Everything in this movie is definitely more than adequate. It's very good. It's just if I'm comparing it to some of the greatest movies I've ever seen, I feel like the relationship that William Wallace has with his wife is a little more impacting than like what he goes through with Sinead, and stuff like that. But again, nothing against the movie. It's still very good. They're just very different kinds of movies, is what I guess what I'm saying. So I would heavily recommend it to someone if I felt like this is the kind of movie they were looking for. And if they're looking for something that's a little less historic and a little more escapist, I would definitely recommend 5 or 6 other movies that are similar to it.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into the but maybe I can hold off on this and go wait till the second half as far as the analysis of this. But yeah, my rating is also a 7, and it was a 7 back then too. And I thought, oh wow, I should have rated it 6 back then, and maybe 7 now. But I think me and Jason are in the same place that it's a good movie. To me, 7 is still considered a good movie. It's just that it's not outstanding, at least from my perspective. And that's why, yes, I would only recommend it to someone who was looking for that specific type of thing. It's not a movie where like, oh my God, no matter whatever movies you like, if you watch this, it's gonna blow your mind. It's just a very specific style. It's a very specific story, specific politics. There's a lot of specificity, which is good in movies, and it's good to have a point of view. But whether or not it connects with more people, that's just the wind that shakes the barley.
To illustrate what we're saying, I think anyway, definitely what I'm saying, I think what Gil's saying, it's a very good movie. But like what Gil said, something that like it doesn't matter what kind of a person you are, you'll like a movie that's like so good. A similar movie that I think anybody could watch and walk away like totally life changed would be like Lawrence of Arabia. You know, again, band of people fighting against a superior force and so on and so forth. It's like the British, I think, actually. but but yeah, what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying is very good movie. It's just not Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, like many movies.
Well,
That movie.
that's putting it in very, very highly regarded company.
Yes.
Uh, but so are we officially in the
Yeah,
go
let's get
for
into
it.
spoilers.
Right. So I think the thing that really sticks out to me about The Wind That Shakes the Barley is how it deals with the characters of Damien and Teddy O'Donovan, two brothers. Because Damien starts off the movie as reluctant to even get into the whole mess. He doesn't really want to fight. He doesn't want to pick up a gun. He's a doctor. He wants to save lives. He doesn't want to take lives. Teddy is the idealist at the beginning of the movie. And Teddy is the person who wants to pick up arms and push the British out of Irish territory. And during the course of the film, I think it's really very well handled. Why, at the end of the movie, Damien is the idealist and Teddy becomes the pragmatist. Just a couple of moments toward the end of the film kind of illustrate everything that led up to the ending. And when you look back at the process that brought us to that moment, I don't really see any holes in the plot. Namely, Damien says to Teddy, I've known Chris Riley since he was a child, and I shot him. I shot him because I don't sell out. And finally, when Damien is writing his final letter, he's saying, it's one thing to know what you're against, it's quite another thing to know what you're for. And so Damien has this entire story built around him where he goes from a reluctant actor in this entire conflict to the revolutionary who won't back down for anything, even when his life is, basically going to be given up. Whereas Teddy starts off as the radical in the story, and you get why at the end of the movie he's saying, like, geez, take what they're giving us. There
Yeah.
are fewer dead people if we just take what they give us. Bottom line is, you can see why these characters are intersecting and then diverging. That's why the movie is so good to me. Uh, and also, like, Ken Loach is clearly on the side of Damien. He is 100% on the side of Damien. I don't mistake that for a moment, but he understands Teddy's side well enough to write a fully rounded character with an opposing view.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's politics. I mean, you do have to compromise to some degree.
Yeah.
But I think I do agree that that's one of the strongest points of the movie is that that switch does happen, and it's way more interesting the internal. That's why it takes so long for that to happen, which is why it was rough for me, because the whole thing with the British and stuff is just brutal and it's harsh, and the British are like disgusting characters. There's some like interesting characters that are conflicted characters. They see how they show the whole thing of reluctant soldiers and stuff on the English
Yeah.
side as well. But as far as Damien and Teddy, Damien gives up more in the beginning to join the cause. He loses out on a life. He had a life set up for
Yeah.
him. He was gonna go be a doctor in London or something, and he gave that up. So obviously, when you give up more for a cause, you're less likely to compromise. Teddy was an insider. He was an outsider, but an insider from the get-go. So he came at it from the place of we need to win, and winning is to some degree, but he didn't sacrifice as much as Damien has. So it's an easier thing for him to compromise than Damien. I think that's a lot of what the logic there is, like why that's the case.
Yeah.
And that stuff is definitely the best part of the movie. It's just that the way it got there was slow.
I mean, Teddy had to sacrifice all of his fingernails.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it's in some ways like the physical wounds heal, but for Damien, knowing that the reason why he gave up on his life to join is because he saw the horror that was done to everyday people and stuff, and he just wanted to fight against that. And so it's just they came from a different place at the end of the day in the beginning, and that's why they ended up in a different place. No, I mean that stuff is good stuff about just people and the human condition and all that. That's very good.
I don't disagree with any particular point. I definitely think those are the strongest points of the movie for sure. It's all very good. I mean, I hate to continually compare it to like great movies, but like, as we said before,
Keep doing
the
it.
violence is like is a little lacking at times. Like, I don't mean the violence, there's moments like when Davos dies where it's like, you spoiler alert, where like, I mean, it's just like they're not showing nothing, and luckily Cillian Murphy is selling the hell out of it with his face, like his reaction. But like, I mean, it's like the guy's like getting shot like 6 times or something on the ground. I mean, let's see some gaping holes in his torso, But no, more than that, even like, I thought it was very good, but I was really rooting for Damien, aside from just success at defeating the British and doing what they're doing and everything. I wanted his relationship to work out well, and I guess it kind of did. But I mean, we barely get that little scene after the British chop her hair off. I mean, I thought he was gonna go take Sinead O'Connor out into like the water, like William Wallace, and just like get it on. I thought we'd get at least some like side boob or something, and you know, and I mean, it was good. It could have been better, but it was very very
Definitely not that kind of movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
good. Would it have disappointed? I mean, it would have still had all the same impact, maybe more.
But I guess that's a good thing to discuss then as far as analysis, because I mentioned the thing about minimalist cinema and realism and having very few cuts, trying to covering a scene more in the wide, and there's like inserts and close-ups here and there, but it definitely feels his style is very naturalistic. That's his thing. He even uses non-actors in a lot of his movies. I think less
Oh,
so
really?
in
Like
this.
who?
Ken Loach. It's like his thing.
Oh, I know you meant Ken Loach. I mean, did this movie have any?
No,
Some.
actually,
That's
a lot of the actors playing British soldiers were actually British soldiers. They didn't actually cast actors; they just cast British soldiers. So, yeah.
Yeah, so there's always like some segment of the cast with him that's
Interesting.
that's like yeah, exactly, not non-professional actors, because he likes the feel that they bring, the naturalistic, the not very pro approach to being aware of the camera and acting. He likes that, natural disposition of people. He's a people person. But um, and there's been movies over the years. There's one Israeli movie that I really liked that had a similar approach. But I think ultimately, plot and themes are really what can make or break a movie that goes that realistic approach. Remember that movie with Billy Bob Thornton, the one Blade? What's a
Monsters Ball?
Sling
no
Blade?
Sling Blade?
Oh yeah, Slingblade.
Yeah, I remember that
French
movie
fried
was all.
taters.
Yeah, I remember that movie also being very minimalistly
Very.
done, and it works. I think I might even like it better than. Oh, I rated it 7. But I probably for the same reason. See, my ratings is consistent lately. I'm very happy about that. But it's a really good story, and the acting is magnificent. But come on, can I get a cut here or there, or can we move the camera like slightly more? It's just, it just feels like it's cinema. Kubrick said we're not taking photograph of reality. We're taking a photograph of reality.
Yeah.
We're dramatizing reality. It's not a documentary. And I know that neither of these movies is a documentary and doesn't feel that way, but it just doesn't heighten the drama as much as most movies do, and it's just a very specific type of movie, and it kind of works for what it is. It's just that it's, I guess, in my specific case, not my favorite type of movies. And yeah, I'm a big Bergman fan, and Bergman, some of his movies, they're very, very dramatized, and the shot making is crazy. But some of his movies, very naturalistic stuff, like scenes from a
Yeah.
marriage, and some of those other ones, it doesn't go too far with the images. Not all of them have a bunch of weird flashbacks and dream
Yeah.
sequences. Some of them are very, very simplistic, but the language, the dramatization, all that stuff is just, you're watching a movie. You're not watching life. You're watching a very specific story about very specific characters, and it's just a certain style that just works for some and doesn't work for others.
Just to chime in, I agree. In very good analogy with Slingblade. Spoiler alert for anyone who's never seen Slingblade, but like when I saw that movie for the first time, nobody told me what kind of a movie it was. Some friend from school, this would have been like probably junior high or something. They just said to me like, "You got to see this movie, Slingblade," and I'm like, "Oh, that sounds exciting." And they're like, "Yeah, Billy Bob Thornton's in it." I was like, "Okay, well, he's cool, whatever." And they were like, "He takes a lawnmower blade and slices some dude's head open with it," and I was like, "Yeah." Then I saw the movie and I was like, "Oh, huh, very different."
Yeah,
Yeah,
and one thing I'll say about Sling Blade, sorry, Matt, just before I forget.
go ahead.
Yeah, so Sling Blade famously, because we watched it, I think, in film school, if I'm not mistaken, but I think we saw the short that came before the feature,
I didn't,
and
but you may have.
but I remember we made a comparison there that the short, it's 25 minutes and there's so much cinema stuffed into it. It's so highly dramatized. The mood, the shots, the movement, it's really just the complete opposite of the feature film, where there's almost none of that, and it's all very, very quiet, very wide shots, barely any close up, barely any camera movement. Very different style. And obviously I like the short better because it set a mood. It made me feel something. Whereas with the movie, you just have to suck up the dialogue and the plot and put the mood in your head together, essentially, which is to me less so what cinema is supposed to be. But again, I understand that it's a choice that people make because they're trying to have a different type of impact. But it's with that specific movie, it's kind of interesting where the shorts tend to be a lot stuffed into them because they're shorts. So you're trying to get a lot of cool shots in there and set a mood very quickly. But yeah, that's the exact same movie, like same characters, not the whole plot, but you kind of see how it's two different approaches that work very differently for some.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny because it kind of delves back into everything that Marshall McLuhan was always saying about hot media and cold media.
Refresh my memory.
Okay, so
I think you mentioned that in one of the earlier episodes, yeah, the cold and hot
I
media
think so
stuff.
too, but I don't remember.
yeah, Woody Allen actually had him in Annie Hall.
Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Marshall McLuhan basically said that there's hot media and there's cold media, and hot media are when basically you're a passive viewer and everything is just kind of washing over you. You're just kind of sitting there taking it in. And cold media are when you're sitting there and you actually have to, your brain actually has to interact with the media in order for you uh, uh, to engage with it. So Marshall McLuhan would argue that cinema generally is a hot medium in that, you just kind of sit there and let it wash over you. Like you're a passive actor as a viewer of cinema, but reading a book, novels would be cold media in that you actually have to sit there, read the book, process it, and put it through your brain. So you're more of an active audience in that sense.
Hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense. And I apologize for any audience that might be listening to this if that just sounded confusing, but I mean,
It's not too confusing, and I think we mentioned last time that we brought this up that movies also splice to two different types. There's the ones that you have to engage with, and there's the one that engage with you right away.
right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that you could actually make an argument that maybe The Wind That Shakes the Barley is an example of cold media in cinema. But I, I wouldn't make that argument though. I think that it's actually pretty in your face about just about everything. I'm just saying that the argument could be made.
Yes,
Yeah.
but even within the discussion or argument of cold versus hot type of movie, there's a lot of movies like Ikiru. I think I might have mentioned that last time.
Yeah,
Ikiru or any Bergman film is very cold media. I mean, it's like you really need to strap in for those movies to get with them. It's not the Seven Samurai, and it's not some other foreign films, or
No.
like it's not like, say, but even La Dolce Vita. I feel like some of Fellini movies like are very very engaging. They're very loud. They're very fast paced. But although some of his movies are definitely, but you compare that with like The Bicycle Thieves or some other foreign films, very very cold. Like you basically really need to have your eyes wide open and listen in and process. Otherwise, you're just not gonna you're not gonna stay with it. So Kieslowski was another one I think we brought last time, like the Decalogues and the Three Colors. Yeah, those, and not to mention Tarkovsky, probably the goat of coldness. You basically like, yeah. So so yeah, no, it's definitely but Tarkovsky, and especially like Kubrick and some of the other ones like Terrence Malick, they throw some crazy visuals at you and flashbacks and dream sequences and crazy good dialogue sometimes, and it's not The Wind That Shakes the Barley or Sling Blade. It's not realism. It's not minimalism. It's very different, but it's still cold. You still need to make an extra effort to engage with them. So it's within the genre. There's different types of styles.
I mean, I would argue, and I mean, this could be Matt's cinematography, whatever the hell we decided to call it, thing.
Rant, rant, rant,
Okay,
rant.
Matt's cinematography rant. I mean, I thought that Barry Ackroyd kind of knocked it out of the park with this movie. And I mean, like literally to the point that I would say that until Fujifilm starts making motion picture film stock again, we should just never shoot a movie in Ireland again.
Hmm.
I mean, the way that Fujifilm reproduces greens, Kodak doesn't do that.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It is just awful that we're watching so many movies now that have all this beautiful greenery around them, and we have to shoot on digital or we have to shoot on Kodak. Fujifilm knocked it out of the freaking park when it came to reproducing greens and blues. I mean, just look at movies like, Rescue Dawn
Yeah.
or Munich. I know Gil doesn't like Munich, but I mean the cinematography is pretty damn good.
I don't dislike it. I just have issues with it. But yeah, it's a very well made movie.
Yeah, I mean Fujifilm was always gorgeous in the greens and blues in terms of color spectrum, and it drives me nuts that it's gone. I mean, uh, one of the best things about this movie was the cinematography. And
Yeah.
like this is Barry Ackroyd, who kind of gained a name for himself for like the handheld long lens shaky camera stuff, and there's none of that in this movie. He went entirely against the Barry Ackroyd grain. Boy, there are a lot of entendres there, but I mean, he's just good. He does a brilliant job shooting this movie, and most of it is in broad daylight. Most of it is dealing with the natural landscape, and he just knocks it out of the freaking park. It's just great. There are a couple of rack apertures in the movie that stood out to me that probably could have been done better. But for the most part, holy moly, this is a great looking movie.
Yeah, I
And you
was gonna say that there was a few rack, yeah, aperture there that was like that's a bit too much, but I think it's probably like Ken Loach forcing him to do that
yeah,
against his will.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, bottom line, it's just one of those things. Until we bring Fuji back, we are not going to see a movie that looks like this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, on a quicker rant, it's funny enough, I listened to a podcast with John Seal, cinematographer,
Yeah,
and he was talking about working with Peter Weir, and I think it was Mosquito Coast or one of those movies that had a jungle in it. And he said like, I want you to make this jungle look because it's so beautiful. We need to make it look as ugly as possible, like the most uninviting place. And he said like, and we tested all these different stocks and everything, and Kodak looked great, and this looked great, and Fuji looked like crap. So we went with that. But I guess that might have been like I don't know if that was the Fuji at the time, not in the mid 2000s, but this was back in like the late 80s or early 90s. But
yeah.
in any case, but in a good way, like it gave the effect that they were looking for. They were like a grimy looking jungle, and that's what they were going for. In any case, but yes, for different reasons, you decide on different formats. But as far as the cinematography, I agree. It's pretty good. There's a lot of blown out windows, a bit too much of it. But I guess that was the only way for him to basically light the scenes, because Ken Loach is famous for not wanting any lights in the actual location. Like it needs to be outside of it. So he definitely makes the most of it. But yeah, no, I mean that stuff is definitely there's definitely an art to that to make the movie look still stylized, lighting wise, and presentable in spite of the restrictions.
Well, I mean, you know full well that there have been times when I've blown out windows entirely deliberately. So
Yeah. I just think it doesn't work in all circumstances, but yeah, but as far as it definitely was shot well. Like the whole dark interiors with shafts of lights coming always coming in and lighting just people's faces and yeah, no, it's that part was good. That was good dramatization of the. I would say that's better than Slingblade, I think, as far as the lighting is concerned. But the rest of it just didn't. Yeah, but again, I don't think neither me or Jason disliked the movie. It's just that it's a certain kind of movie with a certain kind of pace and certain kind of style,
you know,
and it's yes,
I mean, I guess it is one of those things where I would just say, yeah, it's a certain kind of movie for a certain kind of people, and so on and so forth. But still, the thing that sticks out to me is that I disagree with the movie. Like, I think that the filmmaker is wrong. I think that the protagonist of the movie is wrong. and I still love it. And I think that says something. I don't know if I'm in a weird position of being somebody who is listening to the other side and saying, "Oh, wow, okay, you're wrong, but this is really good." I actually do feel like I'm in the minority at this point on that issue. But I mean, this movie stands out to me, 14 years later, because I'm on the other side. Because I'm looking at this and saying, this is just a great piece of art. Screw it. I don't care that I'm not a socialist or a communist or that I think that the IRA is generally not a good organization. It is just a good movie.
But it doesn't really. It doesn't. It doesn't pick a side per se. I think it just presents the because it's a movie that's a minimalist and a realist. It's just presenting the dilemma and the track of these two brothers, but it doesn't really make a determination of whether the pragmatic approach or the was better. Because the guy is dead in the end. So did he have the right approach? And then that's the most what he got, but it's selling out wrong. I think it's like any good movie. It kind of leaves it to interpretation. It's not I Am Cuba, or it's like we're gonna here glorify communism per se.
I do think that it does eventually take the side of Damien. I would make the argument that it's much harder to say that the movie took the side of Teddy than it is to say that the movie took the side of Damien.
Well, yeah, the fact that they give him the voiceover at the end, and they more or less read his letter. I think that's clear enough evidence that the filmmaker, the writer, and everybody all would say that that's the person that they admire more out of the two of them. But I think it's pretty fair to both sides.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's admirable about the movie. You know,
Yeah,
uh, like I talked about earlier, this is a person who is able to articulate the other side,
yeah.
which is a rare thing nowadays. Also, he still only shoots on film,
Hmm.
which is awesome.
Can I ask you guys
Yeah, that's
something?
kind of weird with the style of yeah. Go ahead.
Maybe this will lead into the other part of our thing that we hadn't done yet. But as I said, I had never seen this movie before. 2 nights ago, I watched it, and it's like they always have a little synopsis on there and whatever. It described it as from the legendary filmmaker Ken Loach. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm talking trash. I had heard of The Wind That Shakes the Barley. When the movie was done, I was like, damn, that was a good movie. I'm going to look it up online and see what else this genius has done. And I looked at all his other movies, and I was like, yep. Never heard of a single one of them. Not one.
Huh.
Do you think this guy's a legendary filmmaker?
No, but that's what it is, because he's basically like a darling of British cinema, because he's got this very specific style of movie making that's entirely unique to him, and he's stuck to it. And whatever the results are, they don't, let's just say they don't shake the barley that much. Like they don't make a lot of noise, but they're quite small little movies that are just different for whatever
Well,
reason.
I
It's
think
his
there's plenty of
approach,
directors out there that
directing.
are phenomenal at the one thing that they do really, really well and do all the time. But I mean, regardless of how talented the guy may be, do you think he's legendary? That's the word they used. Legendary filmmaker.
Well, I think it's a also faction of time because he's been at it since like the 60s. So I think that's why, because he's made it, it's basically like Scorsese, only Scorsese is a much more well known, but he's basically in a way kind of like the Scorsese of British cinema, but not making the same type of movies. Like I think
guess.
in England, I think his movies are much more well known. He's kind of like a local hero in a way,
Yeah.
because he's also stuck to British cinema. He didn't go like Ridley Scott and
Yeah.
all these other like
I did
just
notice
go
that.
Nolan.
I noticed that it, like, just from the names alone and everything, that all of his movies are very much movies that are made over there and everything. I don't know. It just, the longevity thing you brought up is an interesting point, but I mean, an indie filmmaker could make a low budget film every single year of their life and have like 60 something movies for 40 years or whatever. That doesn't make them legendary if nobody knows what the hell they are.
Yeah, I wouldn't call him legendary, and I think a good example of this is Stan Brakhage.
Who's that?
Exactly. I mean, so Stan Brakhage is the indie filmmaker to end all indie filmmakers. I was first introduced to him in college at Montana State. His whole shtick was getting cinema back to its roots of light and time. So immediately you know that this guy is a dick. Um, so a lot of his movies are literally like him shooting 8 millimeter film with the focus in the wrong place and zooming in and out on a mountain for like 8 minutes.
So your point being, to back up what I was saying, that you can make tons and tons of movies without being legendary.
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the movies that they showed us at Montana State was a Stan Brakhage movie that, like he would actually just sit there scratching film and exposing it to light and and just project that on the screen and say, "Hey, this is a movie." We were sitting there in the auditorium for like 8 minutes with just looking at a black screen. And the professors actually had to tell us, "Oh yeah, by the way, the movie is playing right now."
Um,
We were just looking at a black screen for 8 minutes.
I have no idea, other than what you've just told me, who this guy is, but just throwing this out there because I think it's hilarious. You're talking about all this stuff about this guy, and I clicked on IMDb to look him up, and it's like, it's absolutely backing up what Matt is saying. he's he's got, let me just count this.
Oh
Let me
yeah,
just get
no,
to the
he's
top
also
of this
got
thing.
like
It's
hundreds of
crazy. He's got
movies.
380 credits, and almost every single one is a short film. So this guy's doing, like, let me count here: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's doing about 15 movies a year or so, or at least 10 movies a year on most years of his life. And they're like stuff that's like I'm just going to read off a random number of these titles.
Yeah,
Prelude 1, Prelude 22, The Fur of Home, Blood Drama, Black Ice. I mean, it's like I missed one of them. There's one here somewhere that was like, the moment I read it, I was like, "Ooh, that's some pretentious shit right there." Then again, I've never seen it, so I've never seen any of this guy's movies. I'm just going off what you just told me.
But again, that's okay. Like it goes back to the realism thing. It's there's many ways to make a movie, and obviously, I'm sure that this legendary guy is not connecting with as big of an audience as maybe some other legendary directors. But that's like what movie making. That's how I feel. Thinking about myself. Like, am I still a filmmaker? Am I still trying to be a filmmaker? Will I make a movie again? I mean, hopefully I'll shoot a lot of projects in the future because I enjoy doing it. But ultimately, I think you're a filmmaker if you're just doing it, if you're just at it. And hopefully if somebody sees it, whether it's like a few people in a few festivals, or maybe you post it online, or even you get it distributed online nowadays. It seems like shorts have more of a so and if it connects with 4 people or 4 million people or 40 million people, then so be it. But that's just yeah, it's
Yeah.
The beauty of the medium, it can be many things.
I mean, just to point out the obvious, part of the reason I feel like talking trash is because I'm jealous.
Yeah, I'm sure there's part of that for sure. He's definitely very motivated about making his movies. Although it seems like
At least he was.
he was lagging. Like he's had some breaks between 2004 and 2011, then
Yeah,
2020.
he was making like 10 or anywhere from 5 to 10 movies a year up until 03. Now he's only made one in 04, one in 2011, and one in 2020. So it's like 3 movies in the last 17, 18 years.
I mean, speaking of Dune, there's like the what's his face,
Jodorowsky.
Jodorowsky. Yeah, I feel like that guy is also in the same vein, but maybe slightly more legendary for good reasons. Not that I've seen any of his actual
Slightly
movies,
more
but
infamous, maybe.
infamous, yeah. But it's people that are just borderline should have just not been filmmakers. should have been like, I don't know, painters or something. It's kind of like Lynch too. Like only Lynch compromised enough to actually make some good movies. Like they're just so
Elephant
out
Man.
there. Elephant Man, yes. But straight story. But yeah, no, it's good that they're out there. It's like the Terrence Malicks and the Tarkovskys. It's good that those people are out there making weird movies. But obviously, that's not gonna always be a home run. I'm sure even Brackage had some home runs out of his 380
Maybe.
escapades into filmmaking.
I sincerely doubt it.
Well, you never know. Everybody gets lucky.
We usually talk about this towards the end of these things. This is, for me, for obvious reasons, the absolute best and absolute worst movie I've seen of all of his. Where would you guys place it?
Oh, for Ken Loach.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of his other movies, Matt?
Not many, honestly. I mean, I Daniel Blake was good.
Yeah, they bring him up a lot in the Roger Deakins podcast because he's had at least 2 cinematographers, I think, that have worked with him.
Yeah.
So, and they always talk about his unique approach and stuff. But I was like, I should watch more of his like movies. But no, I think I pretty much haven't seen any of them. So, I guess it is his worst and his best for me as well.
I have to plead some ignorance in that I haven't seen a lot of it.
They do say that this movie is a departure for him because it is a period drama versus contemporary, which is more of what he tends to do. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does British movies, not movies about Ireland. So it's definitely there's a reason why this one stood out more than others, I think. But maybe someday
Yeah.
we'll watch the other ones.
All I can say is that I would recommend I Daniel Blake. That was a very good film. I'm sorry to say that I missed Sorry We Missed You. Uh, that's definitely going to be on my queue. Yeah, The Wind That Shakes the Barley is really the only movie of his that ever stood out to me. That and I Daniel Blake, but I mean, Ken Loach is not somebody who, the new Ken Loach film is coming out. I'm going to run out to the movies to see it. I mean, that's just not where I am.
Can I admit a moment of humorous ignorance on my part?
Sure.
You mentioned about, I don't know, during your little rant and everything about Barry Ackroyd. And
Yeah.
you mentioned how this movie is so beautiful, but really more than anything, it's like a big departure from what he's known for. And you were like saying, what you said, that he was, shaky, handheld, long lens, all that stuff. And in my head, I just kind of laughed as you were, because I didn't want to interrupt you. And I was like, what's he work with Paul Greengrass a lot? And then I clicked on his IMDb page and I was like, oh, yeah, he does like all of his movies practically.
Yeah. Yep.